Okay, my name's Jeff Merton. I'm a forensic accountant working in the forensic division upstairs on level 2. We're a small team. Our boss is Nick Gordian, who's the director. There's me, I work full-time, Alison Presswich, who works part-time, and our PA, Annie, who is there also full-time. I was about to go on maternity leave at some point. So we're only a small team. Fortunately, as you'll probably work out later on, we don't do a lot of work for clients of Cutcher Neale. We prefer that, given that we work in the area where there's legal disputes, we prefer our clients not come from Cutcher Neale because that means they're in trouble. So I'll run through what I'm going to talk about in the brief time I've got. I'm going to talk about what is forensic accounting, because a lot of people don't know what it's about. Different types of forensic accounting. Now, we only specialise in one certain field of it. When should someone call a forensic accountant in? And what we do at Cutcher Neale Forensics, and what I like about it. And one of the little foibles that we've got, because we deal mainly in the family law space, we deal with the single expert regime versus as opposed to how it used to be done 15, 20 years ago, which was an adversarial approach. And if I've got some time, I'll run through a couple of case studies that are interesting cases we've done over the last few years. Okay, what is forensic accounting? Well, it's a specialised area of accounting. You've got specialised areas like insolvency, you've got audit, that sort of thing. So we're just another one of those. Forensic means to assist the court. So our job is to prepare accounting advice for the court to help lawyers resolve litigation matters. The reason for that is because lawyers aren't very good at numbers. You will all have exposure over the time of your career to tax law, and you might have corporations law, etc., etc. So you'll get an understanding of the legal base points and so on. Poor lawyers, they don't get accounting training. So we're there to sort out the problems. You know, probably telling tales out of school, but going back a few years, lawyers might often say get Microsoft Word in their practice. They wouldn't get Excel. Things like that. A lot of them aren't very good at numbers, and that applies to judges too. Some of them are good, but some of them aren't so good. So we prepare reports on accounting issues to assist the courts and tribunals to make their decisions. We're trying to distill some complex issues into a simple form so that the poor old judges and lawyers can understand it. So that's what we do. There are two different types of forensic accounting. The first one, which is probably, when I first started in forensics, people used to hunt me the CSI theme. This one's probably more like that, fraud investigation. So, and there's also the valuation quantification services, which is what we focus on. So fraud investigation, particularly in America, it's a fairly big thing. Over there in America, they've got these people called certified fraud examiners. They go around doing this sort of work. So that may lead to criminal proceedings. And the sort of things they're looking at are money laundering, tax fraud, employee fraud, that sort of thing. We don't do any of that, so we don't have to get up in front of the judge in a criminal matter, and no one's going to get convicted from what we do, I hope. We work on the valuation quantification side of things. So we prepare reports in relation to civil matters. And the bulk of our work's in relation to family law, but we don't do any criminal stuff. So it's probably a little bit more civilised. Sort of things that you do on the valuation side, you look at economic loss calculations. So if I'm injured in some way, my lawyers might say, well, you've got a case to sue somebody, so therefore we need to quantify what sort of loss you've suffered up to now, and then what sort of loss you'll suffer while ever you're injured and can't work due to full capacity, that sort of thing. We do a lot of business valuations. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. We do a lot of valuation superannuation interests. And our side of the world also looks at things like valuation of employee share plans. So, a lot of executives they get a plan where they might get shares in the company that sort of might be dependent upon whether the company performs to a certain level and so on. And we also, our side of the world also looks at forensic investigations. If we get asked to look at maybe anomalies in financial statements and so on. We're not doing that, as I said, for criminal purposes, though. I'm not saying that at some point, if what we come up with in our reports comes out into open court, sometimes that may possibly get referred to the tax office, for instance. But often in your case, you find that the parties to such a matter will be very motivated to make sure they settle out of court because they can get rather expensive for them. not going to work anymore? No, that's not. All right, sorry. Okay, so when should someone engage a forensic accountant? This is something you might have to come across later on in your careers. So just keep this in the back of your mind. It's more when they're unsure about what they're looking at. So the solicitors obviously aren't in a position and don't have the qualification and experience to say this is the value of something or this is what the effect of all these strange transactions have had on things. So they want us to have a look at that. Now, as accountants, you also might not have the qualification and experience to prepare a forensic report either. So that's where we come into it. So when someone's going to rely on accounting expertise in court, that's when they need a forensic accountant, more specifically someone who's going to be an expert witness. Another time would be where you've got significant adjustments to profitability or the value of assets, etc., and liabilities. So that's also something that we would need to look at. Non-specialist accountants may not have the expertise, they might not even have the will or desire to do it. And also because you're also acting generally for a client, you've been working for them for years, the other side of the dispute may say, well, you're a bit too close to them, so your advice might not be unbiased. So that's when you get someone who's coming in from outside to look at it, who's, they're supposed to be more independent. And independence is very important in our line of work. Actually, I'll digress slightly there. We're working on a family law matter at the moment, and we're acting as a single expert, and I'll explain that shortly. So we're working for both sides, and we got some information response come in. I think it was in October. I had a look at it when it came in. Then 6 weeks later, the solicitor for one of the parties said, "Well, sorry, the other side shouldn't have sent that to you, and we haven't had a chance to look at it. So, tell us what you've actually seen," and so on. So we wrote back to them and said, "Well, I've had a look at it. Nick hasn't had a look at it." So they've just come back to us in the last few days saying, well, they don't want Jeff to have a look at it any further role in looking at this work. So Alison and Nick will have to now work on that. So that's very important for us so that we can maintain independence and no questions will be placed on our report when it comes out. And one of the other things that we do is we try to manage expectations. Sometimes in a dispute, one party might say, well, this business is worth a mite, so we've been living on the high hog for years and years and years. I know that, so therefore it's worth a mite. But then when you actually go and look at it, you look at the trading performance, etc., it might not be worth as much as they think, and you've got to try and manage their expectations and bring them down to a reasonable level. And we also obviously, if you've got some investigation matters to do, then a forensic accountant will be your friend there. We will probably be adopting procedures that are not dissimilar to what the auditors will do, but we're prepared to go to court, etc., and we're an expert in that sort of thing. Okay, so what do we do at Cutcher Neale? Well, we're a small team, so we obviously can't do with everything. So we specialise in the valuation and quantification side of the profession. A lot of what we do is we do those economic loss transactions to work out what people have lost over because of their injury or illness or whatever. We also, probably the bread and butter of our work is business valuations, so particularly in the family law context. You're going through a divorce, you've got to work out what the pool of assets is for the purposes of the divorce. So when there's a business or maybe an entity that has investments in other entities or listed shares or whatever, you've got to work out what all those are worth so that you can put them into the value of the pool, and the court can split them as it chooses. So that's where we come in. We also do business valuations for commercial purposes as well. We value superannuation funds, not generally your normal accumulation style funds. Now, I don't know what you know about accumulation funds, but they're sort of like a bank account. That's what most of us have. Some older style funds, particularly in the public service, they're what's called a defined benefit fund, where the benefit's not based on what you've stuck in plus interest, etc. It's based on a defined outcome, where the benefit at the end of the day might be a factor of what your salary was when you finished work times some sort of multiple. So we work out what they are, particularly for family law purposes. We look at employee share plan valuations. So we've done a few of those recently for Australian-based plans, American and European ones. Some of those have quite a lot of value. We do some forensic investigations, particularly when, let's say, the parties have a lack of trust with each other. There's allegations of funds being siphoned off for various purposes that are not related to the business. We've just been working on one that went out the other day where the lady in question was disputing iTunes accounts and all that sort of stuff. It seemed trivial to us, but that's what she wanted to do. So they spent rather a fair bit of money on that. We couldn't see the value in it. We tried to explain that to them, but that's what they needed to do to resolve their dispute. So we had a look at that. So that's what we do at Cutcher Neale. The good thing about it is there's plenty of variety and people keep getting into disputes all the time. So the work should keep rolling in. And I missed the last one. The last portion of what we do is family law. So I would say probably 3/4 of our work is related to family law. I sometimes have moral issues with that in the sense that I'm making a living out of other people's misfortune. But then on the other hand, looking on the bright side, I can say, well, we're actually helping people to get out of their problems. It might cost them a little bit of money, but they need to get out of it, move on with their lives, and we're the ones helping them to do that. So it's a good outcome for them, hopefully. And what I like about it, well, it's different. Every job is different. So I'll contrast that to what you might do if you work in the business services side of the profession. You work in that sort of thing, well, you're probably going to work on the same job year after year after year, the same set of clients. They'll change a bit over time, but basically you'll go over their work year after year after year. Now that's good in the sense that you'll get a really good understanding of what their business does and you can provide good advice to them about that, and that's what it's all about. But in our line of work, we only look at the business at a certain snapshot in time. So, but then we'll move on and work on some completely different business. So that we don't get the same business each year after year, hopefully. Sometimes they do come back. We prefer that they don't, but they do. So we're always learning about different industries and different businesses. We focus on all sorts, well, we don't really focus, we get businesses come in from all lines of work. Some of them are really profitable. You might have heard them if I could tell you about them, but I can't. But there are some really well-known businesses in there. There's some really quite small businesses, micro businesses. Sometimes we get a request for evaluation and we have a look and say, we don't think there's really much to this. It doesn't earn a lot or it doesn't have a lot of assets. So what we'll tend to do there is say, well, in that circumstance, how about we all have a telephone conversation or something and we'll say what we think it's worth or what the outcome might be. And then the parties can then say, okay, we don't think it's worth spending the money on and getting a report done. It's really not worth much. And that's part of that is managing expectations so that if we can maybe convince the non-business operating spouse that the business isn't worth as much as they think it probably is, that way a settlement might be able to be achieved. So we're learning about different things all the time. Got to do a bit of industry research, etc. We're helping people to resolve their difficult disputes. At the end of the day, it's nice to know that they've managed to sort things out. Unfortunately, in our line of work, we are a little bit like mushrooms. We are kept in the dark. The solicitors often don't tell us about how it ended up resolving. We might just hear that the matter settled, or if it didn't settle, then we might have to go to court and give evidence. But we like it when they settle because that means that they've actually got they've managed to bury the hatchet enough to get an outcome out of it. Even when it goes to court, though, at least the matter's behind them. It's sorted. They can move on with their lives. And the other thing I like is I used to do tax returns, etc. for a living. I don't have to do compliance work anymore. I think that's good. I didn't mind compliance work when I did it, and you guys, if you ever do it, you might really enjoy it as well. But I quite like not having to do that, and I quite like the variety and the differences in each matter. I talked about we work in the family law field. In the family law field, we operate under what's known as a single expert regime. It's a response to the fact that prior to this regime, each side would have their own expert witnesses. Now, those expert witnesses might be forensic accountants, they might be engineers, they might be surveyors, depending on what sort of dispute they've got. So each party would have their own expert witnesses, and of course that leads to the problem of duplication and increased costs. So each expert has to go out and get all the evidence they need, put a report together, and then you'll have probably a dispute between the experts as to what the actual outcome is. So it was felt that in order to reduce those sort of costs and disputes, that we should move to what's known as a single expert regime. Now, this hasn't rolled out to most of the jurisdictions in the country, but it has really rolled out in the family court. So that's the one we operate on in the family court. So in that one, they appoint one single expert. Now, that can either be by the parties agreeing to appoint an expert, or the court will decide that we're going to appoint expert X, Y, Z. We will often get phone calls from solicitors saying, "Oh, can you give us a quote on preparing this valuation? We've got to put together three names, and then the other side will select from them." So that's what we do. And they'll select the three names, they'll agree on one, and if we get the job, then we'll prepare the report. So we are acting on behalf of both parties. Now, we would always do everything we can to be independent and objective, but in this particular case, it's even more important to be independent and objective because we're acting for both, so we're acting in both their interests. Our duty is to the court. We're not to act as an advocate for either side, so we've got to be straight down the middle. And we're really careful on maintaining our independence because we don't want to have any accusations made against us of any bias. Because, if for no other reason, that might completely invalidate what we've done. The parties are back to square one. It costs a lot of money. We don't want that to happen. So in the single expert regime, so we'll prepare a report. After we've delivered it, the parties then have 21 days to ask questions. I think it's 21, might be 28 days to ask questions of that report. They can only ask questions relating to what's in the report. They can't go and ask us to do additional work. I mean, not as part of that process. They can, if they want additional work done, but they can, of course, ask for it. And they can ask questions either in writing or in a conference. We very rarely have conferences. They're not always in writing. Solicitors love things being in writing. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the way we've got to work in this field? Advantages are the costs should be kept under control for the parties. They're not preparing two sets of reports, but does it always lead to lower costs? Not always. In a small matter where there's not a lot of money at stake, it should. But in a matter where there might be millions and millions of dollars at stake, what we'll find is there'll be a single expert, and each side will then go out and appoint what's known as a shadow expert, so that their own interests are safeguarded. So what they will tend to do is they might have input into the instructions that are provided to us. They might look over the information before it comes to us, and they'll certainly go and have a look at our valuation report and conclusions. And then if there are any questions that the parties then put to us, they've probably either written those questions or had a really strong input into those questions. And sometimes even they might ask you to go in some sort of conference or discussion with those shadow experts. That doesn't often happen, but it can. And that's how that works. The problem is that the process is more cumbersome. I sort of do pine back to the days when I was in business services, and if I had a question about something, I'd just get the client on the phone and ask them, or send them an email. With family law situation, I've got to basically, unless instructed otherwise, I've got to send out an email or whatever to both sides in writing. They've got to write back to me in writing. So it all takes time. So there's normally a fair delay between when we ask for something, when it comes in, and we just can't get the client on the phone and ask them. Very rare, well, we can occasionally, but very rarely. The other problem from a conceptual issue is that you might have a problem where if an expert gets it wrong, no one might pick it up. Whereas if you had the old approach with two different experts coming from either side, hopefully they can point out flaws in each other's report. The shadow expert, if they're there, might be able to do that, but on the smaller matters, we see reports that are rubbish. Let's face it, some people are pretty bad at it. And we say, but there might not be anything we can do about it by the time we get to it. They might be out of time or whatever. So there's not much of a backstop to ensure quality reports go out. So it works, but there are some whiskers to it. I'll run through a few cases in the time I've got left, just to some matters that we've dealt with. We had a matter there a few years ago where there was a sandwich shop. I think it was at Bondi Junction. This sandwich shop did report pretty low levels of income. So we're a bit suspicious of it. They had very little wages too. and thinking, okay, that looks a bit odd. So Nick was in Sydney for another matter. He happened to call in at Bondi Junction and saw that rather than the maybe single person that should have been on the books according to their accounts, they had 3 or 4 people working there. So that meant obviously that the takings were probably a lot lower. So we prepared a report on that basis, and it probably didn't turn out as well as the business owner would have liked. I worked on a matter a number of years ago that involved a car wash. This again had very low income, but fortunately the business services side of our firm, they had some car washes on the books, and they were given permission by the owners of those firms to have a look at their accounts on a confidential basis. And we saw on those that the main driver of the income from a car wash is water sales. So we took the water sales that we had from our subject business, the one we're valuing, and applied them, sort of scaled those up to what the income should have been had they been declaring all their income. So the valuation came in a lot more than what it would have been had we looked at the numbers that were actually there. And I think that one settled out of court. You wouldn't want to be taking that one in front of the judge. Fairly recently, we've had a real estate agency dealing with some foreign clients. Really large commissions were being paid. Some of those commissions were being paid to people associated with the business owner. It was unclear as to what the commissions were being paid for, and the business was. And then when the restrictions on foreign nationals buying property were introduced, their business was also a little bit suffering. So we prepared some work for them. Eventually the matter settled because, again, it got a bit messy for them. That's all we often find, that when things start getting messy for people, they tend to settle because they don't want that to come out in court. We did an import-export business. This business used to, well, still does, imports and exports both new paper and used paper back for recycling. They had a former staff member who got a bit annoyed with them, resigned. Well, that was in dispute. And they alleging he was giving information about their business out to its competitors and whatnot. While we didn't look at that, they were asking us all these questions about, well, can you see where the guy did this and then this other effect happened that damaged our business? And every time we looked at it, we could not draw a link between his alleged actions and all this loss that you reckon you've suffered. We couldn't see the losses. Businesses go up and down, and that's it was just going up and down like it normally was. We couldn't actually say, well, this action caused the business to go down for that period. Couldn't see that. So I think they probably got a bit disgruntled at the end of it because they kept saying, well, no, but that's how it was, and that's how they had to proceed. We had a media personality. He used to be on a well-known TV show on the Nine Network. No, not Carl. He was trying to get his ex-wife out of a property held by the super fund. She didn't want to go. She had a daughter in there as well. We had problems with it, with lack of compliance with superannuation regulations and laws. And unfortunately, the poor bugger died before the matter settled, so his estate had to then deal with that. Yeah, it was a bit sad, but I think we got a fairly decent outcome for them on that one. We had a call centre business a few years ago. A lot of their work was relating to those private colleges, you see. So they would be offering incentives for people to sign up for private education courses, your iPads, etc., etc., etc. They were also badly affected by the changes in regulations in relation to that. The issue that really arose for us was that there were a few anomalies in the financial statements, and we were asking about those. They'd recently been bought, the majority of the company had recently been bought by an Indonesian, I think it was, firm. And we were at a meeting there in Sydney with the husband, the wife, the accountant, and the 2 sets of solicitors. And we were asking about these anomalies in the financial statements, and particularly in relation to how you just happen to meet a performance hurdle, so that you've got paid the last tranche of the money you were owed from the purchase, because it didn't look like they were going to make it at one point. And the accountant just said, "Oh, yeah, well, we've crunched the figures on that." So it didn't take long for the matter to settle after that, because if you're fudging the figures on that, who knows what you're fudging the figures on for your family law matter. Yeah, that's why that one settled. I think they didn't want that one to hit in the courts and get a bad judgment there. The tax office might then find out about it. There could be a lot of bad outcomes there. Was a bit alarmed when another matter came in fairly recently that had the same accountant on it, the same accounting firm. That accountant wasn't working on it, but so I've got my antennae up for that one. And a lot of what we also do now is in relation to those defined benefit superannuation interests. There's a big trend at the moment. You can put for family law purposes, you can split out your superannuation into a separate pool. So you've got your house, your business, your cars, etc. in one pool, superannuation in another pool, and then the court might divide the two pools in a different way. And it's really important also because in family law they like to look at the contributions each party's made to the pool, each pool of assets over time. So at the moment we're looking at ways in which those superannuation interests can be, portions of them can be attributed to when before they were married, while they were married and after they were married. Some of those calculations are going to be complicated. We need to know all about how the funds work. And a lot of that's because they want to go and then split that superannuation interest or take it into account properly in terms of the family law pool. So that sort of wraps it up for me today. I hope you got a bit of an understanding of what we do. It is a bit different from what they do upstairs, and like I said, we hope that we don't get referrals from the other divisions of the firm, because that means their clients have a little bit of a problem, and we very rarely do get referrals. And even then, we've got to be careful of what we take on, because we would need to be independent on that, and so there's a limit to what we can do for other firms. Normally we can't act, of course, as a single expert, and that we might just give some advice as a shadow type thing for them. So we don't like to do work for upstairs because they've got a mess on their hands. So have you got anyone got any questions about what Cutcher Neale Forensics do? All right. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.